In 1915, in the small town of Pratt, Kansas, my dad, 13 years old at the time, shook hands with Buffalo Bill. The story goes that Buffalo Bill was hurt during his Wild West show and taken to my grandfather's doctor's office for repair. Dad had been at the event, seen the fall off a horse, and subsequently joined the two. The injury was minor. Buffalo Bill chatted with my dad for a bit and then shook his hand, telling the boy that in the future, when he shook hands with his children and grandchildren, he should tell them that they shook the hand that shook the hand of Buffalo Bill. 35 years later, let's call it exact, Dad shook my hand and gave me the shook the hand that shook the hand speech. I was 7 years old. I was and am impressed. Buffalo Bill Cody may have been the world's greatest equestrian. He was a scout, buffalo hunter, Pony Express rider, showman, and marketer. He knew Custer and Sitting Bull and lived in the era of Wild Bill Hickok and other famous gamblers, outlaws, and lawmen. He took his Wild West show all over the United States as well as places in Mexico, Canada, and Europe. He brought with him cowboys, Indians, guns, railroad trains, stagecoaches, teepees, mules, bison, and most of all, horses. He recreated one of America's most important histories, that of the Plains, whose major players, Indians, cowboys, bison, and horses, had been rapidly disappearing during the decades of his shows. The plains and prairies where Buffalo Bill spent much of his time hold important American history. If one creates a circle on a map with the point on Rapid City, South Dakota, and the pencil on Cody, Wyoming, the area will encompass the battlefield where Custer made his last stand, Indian sacred areas of the Black Hills and the Badlands, and sacred rocks including Devil's Tower and Bear Butte. A long part of the Oregon Trail traverses through Nebraska and Wyoming and includes the landmarks of Chimney Rock, Independence Rock, Split Rock, and almost touches the famous South Pass. Many U.S. forts, including Fetterman, Laramie, Meade, and Kearney, are represented. Rushmore and the Indian counter of Crazy Horse Memorial are placed near the center, as is Deadwood, where Hickok was killed and buried. The circumference just misses Golden, Colorado, the location of Buffalo Bill's gravesite. It does capture a small part of a large Lakota Indian reservation and includes small herds of wild Mustang horses, some genetically related to those brought to New Spain by Cortez. Is it possible that this small circle on a map contains so many important historical sites relating to U.S. Western expansion in the 1800s? Today, many of the Indians are suffering and confined to reservations. A few buffalo roam around the state and national parks. A few real cowboys follow the rodeo circuits. There are cattle and sheep. Prairie winds persist. The plains history that Buffalo Bill knew is gone, with only Mustangs remaining. Arriving in North America in the 1500s, they changed life on the prairie forever. But their time may be numbered, and with that, the tie to our past in that region will be lost. Buffalo Bill, responsible in part for the devastation of the buffalo, would roll in his grave knowing that we are giving up on these horses. This story is about these horses, this historical place, and one extraordinary woman who, in the heart of this historical area near Eagle Butte, South Dakota, and with the help of many compassionate and committed donors, maintains 4 wild horse herds, some descendants of horses brought to North America by the Spanish in the 1500s. Questions regarding wild horse management are: do we have enough land to hold these animals? Do we have enough money to manage them? Are there good enough reasons to protect them? And how effectively is the government, and specifically the BLM, dealing with our wild horses currently?
There's plenty of public land in the United States. There are 10 western states that our herds exist in, and there is plenty of public lands. The problem with that is that there has always been a fight for the last blade of grass on public lands. So those who have the most money win. Those who have the biggest powerful lobby win in Congress. And if you look at it, it's always been, can a few wild horses, 30,000 wild horses on public lands exist in view of the fact that we have 6 million wildlife, or 6 million livestock and 4 million wildlife, and 30,000 wild horses. But over 20 years, the marketing of the Bureau of Land Management has always been that there's too many horses on public lands, so therefore they have to be removed. I got involved in the wild horse program about 1980, well, shortly after I got my horse. 1981 I got my horse. 1983 I started to investigate all the organizations out there. Wild Horse Annie died in 1977. I had read about her on the East Coast, but now I was on the West Coast. But at that time there were only about 4 wild horse organizations. And I chose, rather than beginning another organization, I chose to participate with the International Society for the Protection of Mustangs and Burros. And I can tell you, I made absolutely the right choice. I'm the 3rd president of this organization, and I'm very proud of the historical background of this organization, what it has accomplished, and what it continues to accomplish. Our organization has been involved in saving wild horses for 53 years now, and we were instrumental in getting the law passed with our first president, Wild Horse Annie, who was and remains the icon and the leader of all the wild horse movement. And in 1971, we had a law passed that would have protected wild horses and burros from capture, harassment, and death, because up to that time, millions of horses were being processed into dog food and chicken food. And you would think that 40-some years after the act is passed that we would be safe now. But in essence, we have fewer horses now than we did in 1971. We started out with 303 herds. We now are down to 175 herds. And it continues to, the BLM continues to eliminate wild horses. In their management, the way they manage wild horses, they're managing them to the point where their behaviors, they're destroying the families and the family bands. And this is critical in wildlife. Wild horses are very much like elephants, and they live together in families, they live together in harmony and balance. And once that balance is disrupted, then you have a lot of behaviors that may be untoward what they used to be, what we call the wisdom of the ancients. Our organization started a new program. We were responsible in the past for 3 major events in the wild horse program. As I said, we were responsible for the passage of the 1971 law, which protects wild horses and burros. And then we were also responsible for the adoption program. And we created the adoption program in 1969 and gave it to the Bureau of Land Management in 1976. And since that time, they've adopted out over 200,000 wild horses. The 3rd program we started, that is a major program, we've done many things in between, but the 3rd major program was a wild horse conservation program in 1999. And this program is very important because in all these years that the Bureau has managed the Wild Horse and Burro program, nobody really has studied wild horses at all.
Well, tell me then, what is special or different about the horses in this sanctuary compared to wild horses on BLM lands, for example?
In looking at our horses, the only difference between our horses and their horses, of course, we feed them, so they're not out on 5,000, 10,000 acres feeding themselves through the winter and so forth. We do give them better care. But as far as their social backgrounds, their behaviors, I believe our horses are more well adapted to their behaviors than BLM horses, because when you look at a BLM group of horses, they have been so disrupted through roundups, continual roundups, that I'm not sure that we can say that we have really behaviorally functional animals out on public lands at this point. That's what the most important thing about our project here, and the reason that it's so critical. These horses are just not any horses. 2 of our herds are so behaviorally healthy, and the reason being is because when we got them, they hadn't been gathered and managed in over 50 years. So it gave us true insight into the true nature of wild horses before they have been massively manipulated and families destroyed. And the thing that I noticed about the horses are that they're extremely intelligent. And now with DNA testing, and our geneticist, Dr. Gus Cothran out of Texas A&M, has stated that wild horses have more diversity in their bloodlines compared to any particular breed of horse in the United States.
Are these horses utilitarian people say they don't do anything, or they're not productive, or they don't make money. Do you care about that?
I think when you equate money into everything that we have in the world, if it doesn't make money, we're losing the really aesthetic and beauty of the world. These horses can do anything in the world. The most important thing is they are such a historic part of our country, because once wild horses are gone, they'll never ever be duplicated again. It's taken over 500 years for those horses to be wild and continue to live as their ancestral relatives lived. Had we not domesticated the horse 6,000 years ago, the horse may have been eaten as a food source and might be gone today. But because it has been connected to humankind, they have been the soul. They are connected to our souls for eons of time. They've helped us develop history. Without the horse, we wouldn't be where we are today. What disappoints me is that I believe that we live in a throwaway society today. Everything is disposable, including anything that we don't need any longer.
Do the individual Mustangs have certain personality characteristics that stand out? Can you tell individuals?
When you look at any horse, no matter where they are, I'm sure this is, and I've had plenty of domestic horses in my mind, just like people, every horse has a personality. There are some that are humorous, there are some that are timid, there are some that are assertive. So they mimic pretty much the same type of personalities that you see in human beings.
So do horses have healing powers?
I believe that for ever since the ages of human connection to any horse, that there has been definitely healing powers. You look at the connection, the partnership that you have even in wars where people have fought with these horses. The horses were so well trained that they would come back to pick up a wounded rider. They were taught to get down on their knees to be able to help a wounded rider. So the connection, there's just such a strong connection. What I've noticed on my own is that many people who have alcohol and drug problems, often when they come out here, they're transformed by working with horses. We're ready to do tourism. We're ready to have tourism begin to help us be financially self-sustaining.
So this tourism idea, what's your vision? That people come and look at the horses? They're not going to ride the horses, obviously.
Well, we have such a very big tourism plan that we hope to expand, where people will be able to come. When they walk into our center that we want to create, we want them to walk in a time that doesn't exist anymore. We want them to walk into a time that is about 200 years ago, when horses and buffalo roamed the western rangelands. And so that with that in mind, this is how we're going to create what they're going to see. The interesting thing, when people come to our place to look at our horses, you see all natural behaviors that you don't see in sanctuaries. Because in sanctuaries, they're all gelded or they're all mares, and they're not living together in families. So here you come and you actually see natural behaviors. This is what I think really transforms people when they can come, just like going to Africa. When you go to Africa and view all those animals there living in their natural habitat, and you see them in their natural ways, it's very exciting to be able to watch that. It's very exciting for people in the West to be able to come here, see the West as it once was, that doesn't exist anymore.
Do you get any government or BLM financial support?
We have no federal support. I think many people think we do because we have so many horses, so they probably think most of our money comes from the federal government. We do not get 1 penny from the federal government. All the money that we have, I personally have had to raise, or our board members have had to raise, but generally it's a lot of hard work.
What kind of people would donate for this cause?
The people that really help us generally are a lot of just middle-income donors. We are looking at $35 to $100 donations. It would be wonderful if we had a movie star or somebody that would be able to bequeath us or be able to assist us with a lot of money. But generally, I think most donations come from middle-class people. We really hope that you'll support us in being able to preserve our herds and continue our studies here. And we're very excited that Princeton University is now part of our studies, and it's even more important now that we preserve these herds. So we ask for your support on behalf of the horses. I actually started riding horses when I was 4 years old, and pretty much most of my life was outside in the woods with my girlfriend. She had a pony, and we rode ponies until actually we graduated from high school, so we spent a lot of time out in nature. And it gave me a great appreciation for being free, being out there where you can see all kinds of animals. We used to see deer all the time, and we used to have just a magnificent time as a child on our ponies. And when I became an adult, I got a horse again, and then I had read when I was a child, from the time I was in first grade until sixth grade, the only books that I would read were horses. So somehow, out of a family that never had horses, I was the only horse-crazy girl in it. Walter Farley was my idol, and he wrote about the black stallion, and I read every one of his books, and I always imagined someday being out in the wild with my horse. And it really was amazing when I learned of the government's program to adopt a wild horse. And in 1981, I adopted my first wild horse, and I always say it's all her fault because she transformed me. I had been riding quarter horses, and my goal was to begin showing as an adult. And this horse was so fantastic. Her personality was so incredible, and she was everything I imagined that was in the book with Walter Farley. She exactly was the epitome of what the black stallion would have been. And she was an original horse that hadn't been tampered with, when you think about it, by the government. They had just started to do removals back in 1980. So all this time she was able to be free as a wild horse, and she exhibited this most beautiful personality of a horse, different than any horse that I had ever been on. Then the second horse I got was an older horse. So this was a young horse, and everybody told me there were a lot of lies about wild horses that I had to kind of just delve through all of these misinformations. And so I decided that I would adopt an older horse, and I did. I adopted a 10-year-old harem stallion. And at that time, when I got him through the Bureau of Land Management, they said they didn't want me to take him. They said, you're going to get hurt. And I even built a special round pen that had two rails that were missing on either side so I could dive out. This is how much misinformation there was about wild horses. Well, at 10 years of age, it took me a year to gentle him. And by the time I took him to my trainer my trainer was mad at me. He said, "Don't ever bring me a horse that is so gentle that he won't even move. He won't even get past just walking." And so I was just thrilled because, and then the second thing he said, "And by the way, Karen, you did not teach him how to lead. He follows you. That's the difference. He doesn't know how to lead. He just follows you." So I thought that was pretty interesting. And the horse followed me all the way to South Dakota. He's buried on my farm here. And he was one of my greatest friends. Both my horses were instrumental in my dedication to all wild horses in our country, because I had never experienced this in all this time of being around horses. The attitude, the intelligence, the commitment, the partnership that you have with a wild horse, it's just incredible.